Hello, my name is Yesenia Bello, and I am one of the artists exhibiting work at the In Flux exhibition, currently up at the Chicago Cultural Center. I'll be telling you a bit about my work in the show titled Now is the Closer, Now is the Further. Before I get into it, I'd like to thank the curatorial team and administrators involved in forming this show, as well as the earlier iteration of this exhibition. Thank you, Tricia, Nathan, Teresa, and of course, the Cultural Center staff. As part of this exhibition, us artists were posed with the challenge of considering immigrant artists and their impact on the Chicago cultural landscape. At the time, I was very drawn to György Kepes, a Hungarian immigrant who came to Chicago to teach at the new Bauhaus. At the end of his time in Chicago, Kepes published The Language of Vision, writings on art and design theory that continue to be used by artists today. Within Language of Vision, Kepes goes to describe the way the eye makes sense of color, shape, form, and perspective, all of which are visual cues that lead us to learn a new language, an understanding that is rooted in visual qualities. Language, perspective, and movement have all been concepts that I find within my own work. So the reading of Language of Vision created a lot of freedom for me to play and unpack perception and perspective, especially as it relates to my own internal dialogue. And so I paired my own material exploration and fascination with things like garden hoses and resilient fabrics, with processes of wrapping, encasing, and suspending to create a hanging installation in the backyard of 6018 North. So here you see my installation installed outside during the first iteration of the show. This was part one of what came to be the final form of Now is the Closer, Now is the Further. In the backyard and exposed to all types of weathering, the crafted hoops lived in age, slumped and drooped, but remained intact and moving forward. Oftentimes, I relate the tension put onto these hoops to our own human exhaustion and accumulated tension, especially personally as a first generation, carrying the weight of two places, two histories, and somewhere in between both. So now, finally for the Cultural Center show, I took the weathered hoops and considered what could be if instead of traveling from left to right, the hoops migrated from floor to ceiling, forming an almost warped ladder composition. Here I continued to consider the words of Kepes, in which he states, each new visual environment demands a reorientation, a new way of measuring. I cannot help but align it with the immigrant experience, considering the nimble reorientation that many immigrants have to go through in order to fit into their new environment. As an artist today, my own work conceptually relates to this same key of building one's own visual language and utilizes the viewer's sense of perception and movement as a way to orient my communication. Through my own abstracted autobiographical storytelling, I relay my relationship to language as a first-generation Mexican American, traversing space between losing a native tongue and gaining another. As you can see here, the installation is quite large. It crosses boundaries, twisting its way up the walls and creating space for itself up above. For scale, you can see that once approached, the viewer is at the foot of the ladder, sort of like being at the start of an obstacle course. And though the piece is not interactive, my goal is to create the essence of being confronted with a task, feeling as though you can choose to move upward or stay below. Oftentimes, I liken the action of emigrating to flying trapeze, gymnastics, action sports that feel magical and mystical all at once, unnatural feats that are in fact natural. I do have profound respect for my immigrant parents and all immigrants, normalizing the great weight of leaving a home in search for a new one, at times not knowing what will come, but trusting the catch, letting go of one bar to latch on to another. Today, and under continued confrontation with uncertain times, I'm inspired by my peers in the show and many artists who have made their way to Chicago to share in the visual storytelling of our lived experiences. Thank you again to everyone involved and to you, the listener. I hope you continue to stay safe and take care.